Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering. Remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. Today, I'm speaking with Laurie Jean Vogler. She is a facilitator of transformational healing for the last 20 years. She serves people who are ready to do their deep work. Through bodywork, EFT, Reiki, she helps them to discover their own self-love and the soulmate connection within themselves, within their bodies that exists there, right? I am so lucky I got to experience some of Laurie Jean's work when we met each other the last couple rounds at Joshua Tree Music Festival, where she's been doing body work and facilitating healing for people in that environment, which is a really special place. And I got to actually experience her gifts, and she guided me through a really powerful process that was like just really ready to come to the surface inside my body. And I can tell you, she is a powerful guide through healing trauma and helping a person to bring their nervous system back to balance during recovery. Today, we're going to be hearing a bit from Laurie about her personal journey, which involves, some things about nervous system and the impact of adoption on our nervous system. We're going to be talking about how to connect with self-love and self-compassion and discover that we are, in so many ways, our own soulmate. That's part of our design. So thank you, Laurie, for being with me here today. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to be able to share this information and connect with you and your audience and be able to really share my story of, what it was like for me to be adopted and grow up in a transracial family and the experiences that I've had in my body, in my mind, and from the inherited trauma, but also, the blessings that come from all of those experiences, because it gives us an opportunity to reveal and to discover and to go deeper within an experience and the trauma to, release it and to come back to a place of homeostasis.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you're saying. It's, when we're going through it, it can kind of feel like the worst. And then as we start to heal and unwind and come back to what we maybe even didn't know we had, like the self-love and the power of love that we didn't even know was possible to experience, we can start to see that like silver lining or experience that blessing that darkness is actually, the other side of.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel that, each of my experiences were really an opportunity for me to heal and for me to deepen my well of experience of being able to hold a space that covers so much ground from personal firsthand experience.
Yeah, I felt that when we worked together, when I got the opportunity to work with you. And that was a wonderful insight that I feel like you kind of transmitted to me through your being. I could definitely feel into that. And thank you for the work that you've done for yourself and that you help other people through. Can you tell us a bit about your journey, like anywhere that you want to start on your timeline, or to share a bit about where you've come from?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I was adopted when I was 5 years old from South Korea, and my family were very kind and loving in the most part. But like most families, they also experienced a lot of stress in around work and family life, and didn't really have the best support to come from a balanced and grounded family dynamic themselves. And so I really truly feel that they did their best. However, the effects of my upbringing was pretty traumatic. Before even being adopted, I feel that there is an inherited trauma of the original separation and loss, but then to go deeper back, the inherited trauma from lineage of our biological families, of what they had experienced especially too because there was the Korean War, and that created, a lot of separation, confusion, death, and traumatic experiences for people. And that's something that's not really talked about, but it's really brought in a lot of insight for me when working with my nervous system.
Mm.
I kind of see the nervous system as like a map. And you go into the body, into the soma, and you start investigating through feeling and emotion. And you start finding that it takes you back a lot further than you realize.
Yes, absolutely. I think, the more that we're learning about how, trauma is inherited genetically, and then also how it can be transmitted through our environment, like, not through our genetics, but through our epigenetics, and how
Mm.
conditioning affects like the current state of things basically in our bodies. And then based on the current state of things, that's going to be passed on to our children, or passed on to even the people in our lives who we are surrounded by. And so something like war going on in a country for the years and years that it did would absolutely have an impact on the population. And then you would be the descendants, your generation, my generation would be the descendants of those traumatized people.
Absolutely. Yeah, the power of the mind is incredible. And when we consider the epigenetics and the link between the stress of the lineages and what is really held in the subconscious is really profound because, our core beliefs are found in our subconscious oftentimes, if not in our conscious yet. And in those places, there's oftentimes, issues around self-worth and belonging, confidence, safety, and vulnerability to trust, and all those areas and subjects often aren't discussed or talked about, and let alone in our personal lives now or within our lineages in the past.
Right. Well, it can feel very overwhelming when you start to open kind of this Pandora's box of like how much is actually being held in your unconscious mind, or your, in your body. Some people say the unconscious mind is our body,
Hmm.
and our body's kind of keeping the score of everything that's ever gone down, whether it's in our lives or the lives of people, who are our ancestors, or who are our caretakers, right? That's all affecting our nervous system and how we're experiencing and perceiving the world. And when you start to realize that so much of what you think is like you, and what you're doing in your life is actually this unconscious stress response or trauma response that's just been going on, it can feel enormous. And that's why it's so important and powerful to have guides in these processes when we're first starting to open that up and realize like how much there is to sort through, right? To have somebody, to have some kind of mentor or somebody who's been through it before to hold our hand is part of returning to that regulated state. It's that co-regulation that we didn't get
Absolutely.
from a caregiver. I want to ask something kind of on the lines of co-regulation, nervous system. And, before you were 5 years old and you were adopted into a family that sounds like they did their best to be like a loving family, right? Were you in an orphanage? Were you with your biological family? What was the conditions, from before 5 years old?
I wish that I could tell you that I knew more information. And I've actually gone back to my orphanage and sat with a social worker, looked at my files, and they said that there was no information. So all I can really share is from the time that I arrived into the orphanage. And during that time, I only spent about 4 months in the orphanage. And the only thing that my file had mentioned is that I took care of all the other little children and that I eat a bowl of rice well with a spoon. So that's pretty much all the information that I have, like that was directly shared with me. But I have found actually a lot more information within my nervous system and what my nervous system remembers versus what my conscious mind remembers or what I've been told.
But interestingly enough, those two pieces of information, that you were a nurturer to other children and that you had some fine motor skills, that you were able to eat a bowl of rice well, so to speak, and not make a mess, like all of that points to some level of regulation that you had experienced from a caregiver at some point, right? Like that's what I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely say that as well. When I came to the United States and I was first adopted, received by my adopted family, I really noticed how I came in already loving. I came
Mm.
in affectionate. I came in helpful and curious as well. And so those are definitely some markers to show that I was cared for at one point or another.
Yeah, wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can imagine that there have been times when it's felt frustrating or that there's been grief around not knowing, right? And not being able to remember
Absolutely.
or have that history, you know? And I think it's really amazing that you actually went back in person, right? And you visited the
Hmm.
that is beautiful, powerful thing to do. I've known, another Korean adoptee who did something similar in his 20s, a writer who I mentioned to you when we were on our call the other day, and he wrote extensively, in his poetry about the experience. And just being back there brought certain memories back to him that he had forgotten, But what I think you're pointing to as well that's really important is that we don't have to know on a
Hmm.
level in order to heal. We don't have to know. And sometimes we get obsessed with thinking about like, why don't I know this? Or what does this mean? And that's not actually like required. Can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. For a long time, I was really upset that I didn't know what happened during those 5 years, that I couldn't remember directly. And I would ask people, do you remember memories, when you were 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 years old? And people most likely would say, oh, yeah, I remember, having my diaper changed and, eating some favorite meals or going on walks or such. And searching through my conscious mind, I didn't have any of those memories. And when I started getting into healing work of Reiki and craniosacral and EFT, particularly emotional freedom technique, I started realizing that my nervous system actually was a map in almost like a photo album of sensations, feelings, even smells that my body had actually recorded and remembered, but my conscious mind wasn't able to, comprehend or store at the time. And so, as an adult, and having these tools to be able to go and navigate through my nervous system has actually given me a sense of power from those areas of not knowing.
Yeah, I think that's really a valuable thing for people to hear, that there are ways that our body can process this stuff. And in some ways, like you said, that soothes the part of us that feels like it needs to know, when we can actually experience the softening and the toning back and the unwinding of processing something that doesn't even have like a specific mental image around it, right? It could have, like you said,
Absolutely.
smell or some other kind of a sensation in your body, but doesn't have a story around it. Um,
Absolutely. Yes. And it's funny how the mind always wants to create a story, though, through my experiences of going through my nervous system during those times, I always come across certain smells specifically. And they do say that the olfactory and system in the brain is the largest storage of memory. And I always come to this smell that connects me to an image of eating food by the ocean,
mm,
and it's possibly like some kind of seaweed or some kind of soup, and it has a very like umami kind of taste and smell to it, and it feels very familiar. And there will be certain moments and times where I might be by the ocean or a bay, and I'll get a whiff of that smell, and it takes me back to those original sensations.
wow, yeah. And then kind of the culture shock of coming to the United States wouldn't have been so apparent at 5 years old because you're not so versed on it. You don't have no context for culture necessarily, but your system would have noticed a big difference in all the smells and sensations and environmental changes, right? And then in addition,
Absolutely.
whole different family dynamic that suddenly you're immersed in.
Absolutely. Yeah. I really feel that when you're that young, you're really just a sponge to your environment and the models around you. And I just kind of took everything in, gathered as much information as I could because I couldn't really comprehend everything at that young age. So taking in those models and the environment around me and then being able to decipher them when I got older, actually.
Yeah, it reminds me, and maybe you've heard this or, have a opinion about this, but when we've talked, I've heard people talking about, empathic qualities, this ability to like sense into others and notice how others are feeling. And there's many
Hmm.
saying that this is a nervous system strategy in response to some kind of feeling of unsafety because we need to know and apprehend what other people are going to think and feel and do. And so it becomes this thing that's like a wounded healer kind of thing where it's like it's this wound that we're carrying where we're sort of hyper vigilant about what other people feel and think and are experiencing, and then it turns into something that's actually a huge gift as well.
Absolutely. Naturally, just out of survival, our bodies have a way of, taking in every detail of information and using that in a way to be able to adapt to be, accepted, loved, and kept even. And, to meet the expectations and in each experience and is really kind of overwhelming and tough if you kind of think of it all at once in that young state. But, luckily in that young state, you're not really consciously thinking about these actions of trying to survive and not be abandoned again, potentially. And, you want to be accepted. And so, your body just naturally does what it has to do to be loved, be
Yeah,
supported.
absolutely ensure that safety and ensure that survival. And you're right, it's a very totally unconscious process when we're in it, especially when we're children.
Absolutely.
The impact of adoption and maybe even specifically related to interracial or, adoption as a Korean person in a Korean body coming into the United States, like how was that for you to grow up, in the area that you grew up in a family that was Caucasian, that was white? And how did that feel for you in your body? And what impact do you think that had on you?
I think originally I was absolutely oblivious to being different, to being Korean. And I think that that was a survival strategy, honestly. I really didn't find out that I wasn't white. For some reason, I came in at 5. However, I kind of just went through this experience of the ugly duckling where I just took on the experience and the family and the people around me. And primarily they were all white and Caucasian families around me. And I just took on that persona that I was just like them because that's what the people who around me had looked like, you know? And it wasn't until I was about 8 or 9 years old where I had an experience where I was clearly shown that I did not look the same as others. And in that moment, I remember going home and looking in the mirror and realizing that I never really looked in the mirror and saw that I was different until that moment. And that's when I started really kind of becoming aware of myself, who I am, my experience of being adopted. Because for so long, I think the part of me that really wanted to be accepted, just I adapted so much so that I really thought that I was like everyone else there for a moment. That's probably when I started really realizing that there is a deeper emotions and feelings going on within me. I was realizing that I had experienced a lot of guilt in shame around not being white, not being, potentially good enough to be kept originally, to be, released into an orphanage. I also felt big lack of self-worth. I didn't really know if who I was, and my awareness of my identity. Like, well, if I'm not white, who am I? Because I look like this person that doesn't look like anyone else that I know. So I started really questioning myself and my life and my belonging, my self confidence, and at this time. And it was quite overwhelming at first. And, this is very normal, very natural for a lot of adoptees to kind of go through these experiences and emotions, especially when their cognitive mind starts awakening and having conscious thoughts about, oneself and identity. And it felt really confusing. And so I started finding myself, reaching towards methods to feel better, from drugs to self pleasure to risky behaviors. Used to really be into jumping off of cliffs into water and off of tree swings and such like that. And, I was really trying to push the edge to feel, because all of this information was kind of too much, so I had to numb out a bit. And doing those kind of high risk behaviors, kind of helped me feel not so numb and still alive.
Your description of that, I think, is really telling. You, in so many ways, all these things that we're doing that look like, bad kid activities or whatever, whether it's like, partying or, risky behavior, it is our nervous system trying to balance out, trying to feel better. And it's just, we're doing it in these ways that aren't actually like effective long term and can cause like other problems, right? But I think that when we recognize, just as the way that you spoke about it now, that it's coming from a place of wanting to feel better,
Absolutely.
this like twisted form of self-love, right? And we can
Hmm.
that we kind of are able to take off that, veneer of like shame or like belief that it means we're like a bad kid or we're a bad person or something like that. And we can take away like the stigma of those behaviors and look at it as, well, this is my attempt to feel better. So how can I actually help myself feel better in a way that's like effective and not destructive?
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of the work I've done on myself and the work that I do with others is going back into those experiences and memories where we might have not had as many tools to be able to work with. And we connect with that inner child and that part that might feel stuck or angry or full of shame and loss. And we update that area. We bring in the information and the love and the support and the words that weren't there before, and we kind of fill in those spaces with that love, so that part can be free to be a kid and be playful in it again.
Yes, I know just what you mean because you brought me through a process like that for my own timeline for something that had happened for me, and it was beautiful, and it really, I really felt that space again that you hold that, is only there because of the wide breadth of experiences that you've personally had. And, so much of what you're describing is this just incredibly powerful way to disarm the experience of shame in our bodies and replace it with love.
Absolutely. We always hear the term, you hold all the tools, you hold all the information, you hold all the keys. And that kind of wording kind of annoyed me at first before I felt like I understood that saying a little bit deeper of like, we do hold the information. No one else is going to be able to touch that wound and bring in its healing, its medicine, and support than like anyone else, because no one else knows that wound like ourselves. I think that's why the work I do and facilitate is so powerful, is because I have had the opportunity to have so many traumatic experiences that I can just sit with someone in their wound, in their trauma, without having to change them or judge them, and just sit with them so they can be able to let enough light in, enough love in, enough information in, and then guiding them to help themselves bring in their own, like I said, medicine, which would be their own heart, love, wisdom, and information to, update date that space with what was lacking before.
Beautifully said. Yes, I'd love for you to say a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing around discovering your own soulmate energy within inside yourself, because I know that that was a big theme for you for the first part of your life, was kind of looking outside of yourself for love, and you went through different kind of like phases of life around that, and then it looks like you've arrived at this really gorgeous place. Can you kind of take us through some of that process?
Yeah. When I was younger, a part of me was really looking for, genuine, true acceptance and unconditional love. And I was looking for my value within other people and other experiences. First my adopted mother, but then my relationships, my intimate relationships after them, after adolescence and growing up a little bit more. And I just realized that I kept on finding myself in the same relationship that was not what I wanted. They were oftentimes abusive, and I would put myself in situations that were potentially dangerous, just because I had an skewed belief of what my purpose was in the relationship. I thought it was to fix people or to help them, and to, if I could be able to love them enough, they would, stop drinking alcohol or stop being abusive and such. And, I was looking for this acceptance in relationships and experiences in my life that I wasn't finding what I was looking for. I was looking to be validated, to be loved, to be cherished, to be held in safety. And, the more I looked, I just realized, I don't think this is working out. I don't think I'm doing this right. And, honestly, I just sat down one day and I was like, you know what, universe, I don't think I'm doing this right, because I keep on having the same experiences and the same relationships over and over again. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just work on myself. And till then, I don't really feel the need to date or be intimate or in relationships, or to have, my validation come from anyone else but from myself. And so, for 4 years of that time, I really put my all my focus into just connecting with my own self healer, my own self soother, my own self validator. I realized during this time in work that there was a inner divine feminine within me, and she had certain wants, and I also realized that there was an inner divine masculine within me, and that he had certain wants, and that they could actually console each other and lift each other up, creating a space of, grounded safety, and be able to open myself up to the deeper parts within my being, which I think is my soul. And connecting to my soul really helped me feel like I never have to ever be alone again, you know? And recognizing at that time that, there was this personality of this person that I tried to be and tried to model to society, that, I deserved to be loved, and, all the belief systems, and everything that my personality tried. And realizing that, she tried, yeah, But that was just a piece of the puzzle. And really, deeper within my being, that there's the soul, the person who I came into this world to be, to share, to love. And that personality is the person who was developed for survival. And so, I really love being able to connect people to their deeper soulmate within inside of themselves, the part of them that knows how to support themselves, knows how to self regulate, knows how to co regulate with the connection of that masculine and feminine energies of giving and receiving. And yeah, I really feel that the soul can clean away all that hurt, judgment, distortion, anger, that shame, that the personality loves to stay attached to, and connect a story to. And the soul comes in, fills those spaces up with its love and its wisdom, and that information is all within us, and that we come into this world with this information, and it reminds me of this experience where I was in a locker room with this woman. It was a locker room for the women's locker room. We were at a resort, and the lockers make this little sound when you lock them or open them, and they're like, "Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo." And I just naturally went "Doo-doo-doo-doo-doo," and kind of like, responded to the sound of the locker. And the woman beside me was like, "Oh my goodness, you're so joyful and open and loving, and just the way you interacted with that locker sound." And I just kind of looked at her. I'm like, whoa, yeah, I did, because I am a kind and loving and playful creature. And this is the part of me that has always been there. And when I drop away all the personality, the shame, the guilt, the questions, the who am I's, the identities, and I just let myself be completely bare, what's left is that soul part, that tender part, that kind and playful part that I truly feel has always been there, And like I mentioned earlier, I feel like when I was adopted to my adopted family, I came in open and playful and kind and loving and affectionate, even though that wasn't exactly what they were used to. I've trained them through the years, but yeah, that was definitely some work. I hope I answered your question.
Absolutely. And some. I love it. And, I think that that element of play is a big part of how we actually regulate as children. Children are
Hmm.
playful by nature, and they're sort of in, their brain waves are in this more dreamlike state. And so, there's the way that we learn as children is so much through games and joyful interaction, and that's natural to us. And, to be able to take away the barriers that inhibit that, kind of like
Absolutely.
our natural state is to be like joyful and loving and present, then what are
Hmm.
the things that are inhibiting that from coming to the surface, and how do we work with those things to help them integrate back into our body so that it's not just these stress responses, again, these ways to survive that are running the show, that are determining how we behave, how we interact, even how our bodies feel and look can be impacted immensely by our stress. you know if we kind of go back to what you were saying before about taking this time, this 4 years, to really focus your energy inward, I know that we've had some conversations where you talked about like just the somatic process of that, and kind of
Hmm.
coming into like contact with your physical body in a new way that didn't like require or necessitate outside input from other people, but to like really come into this full acceptance of your body. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. During those 4 years, I really took absolute responsibility for myself and my thoughts and my feelings. And I wasn't going to use any excuses of, oh, this was passed down by this person, or someone said something mean about my body once here, or I felt insecure about that. I had to really take full ownership of my own thoughts and my own beliefs. And I recognized that my body had been holding on to a lot of shame because it did not look like the typical, white Caucasian model that I would see advertised on TV, or movies and things like that. And I realized that I was actually happy that my body didn't look like anyone else's but my own. And I started, and this, when I say this, it sounds all easy, but this is work that had to be done, where I did a lot of mirror work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, where you look in the mirror, look into your eyes, look at your body, and you say your affirmations. Because any thought is really an affirmation, whether it's a positive affirmation or a negative affirmation. And I chose to take responsibility for my thoughts and start affirming that I am lovable just as I am, and that I am in my perfect body. And so I started taking my power back from believing or thinking that it has to look like anyone else's body, and just really taking ownership of my own and recognizing that this is the body that I've been given, and that this is the body that I'm going to love, you know? And, because oftentimes we want to be shorter or thinner, or, or in better shape, or however. And in reality, we can't really make any real changes, physically or mentally or emotionally, without taking ownership of the feelings that we're already feeling. So that's was like probably one of my biggest steps of, taking ownership. Because I think previous to that, I kind of, just thought, well, this happened or that happened, or, my body didn't look like my adopted mother's body, so that means I must be ugly and abnormal and unlovable, which, really tapping into the deeper truth to love myself was the love and acceptance of exactly who I am in the exact body that I'm in. And so breaking free from those old patterns of stress, of survival, and really just allowing myself to let go of that long enough for me to take on the new belief system, for it to stick,
Mm.
and for that to become my new thought and belief system. And there is that kind of gray period at times when you're really trying to like transform a really deeply embedded belief or thought, which it was for me, for around body image. And you kind of have to just endure and just love and accept yourself anyways. And that's kind of just the work I did was, I'm going to love and accept myself anyways, even though there's a part of me that's still a little scared or still a little judgmental about this or that. I'm going to love this part anyways. And the powerful thing about love is that it dissolves that, piercing hatred and self-judgment. And if you put the light on in the room, all the darkness disappears. You just
Mm.
let that light be brighter and brighter, and you let your love shine brighter and brighter. And next thing you know, what are you left with but just love?
Yeah. It's what you're describing, the word that comes to mind is this experience of grace, of being truly
Yes,
held in grace, and that's it's a very much a to be in that sort of space is a very powerful, like it's one of those experiences where you're sort of in your body and you're sort of out of your body at the same time. You're like inhabiting your whole energy field when you're in that
absolutely.
that moment of grace. You're still in your
Absolutely.
body, experiencing your body in this really full way, and you're like super connected to the larger field of energy that exists around you all the time, that is that light, that is that loving space. And, going back to what you said about, taking kind of radical responsibility, I feel like this is sort of a landmark on a journey. And part of the journey is like, we come into the world and we're children and we don't really have a context or an orientation. And we're just, everything's coming in like super experientially. And we're not even like able to sort through it at that time. It's just raw experience. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
a period of time where we start becoming aware, like you described at 8 years old, becoming aware that like you look different than others, that maybe, there are certain feelings or beliefs about yourself that are starting to like form, or fortify in your system. And then, we kind of go perhaps through a rebellion or a destructive phase. And through that experience, we end up realizing how much of like what we're carrying isn't ours. And that's where we end in that like victim,
Exactly.
it's like a victim phase that's like required actually, where we have
Mm-hmm.
like blaming our parents, blaming society, blaming those Victoria's Secret catalogs you found on, the floor when you were 11 that, changed your perception of what beauty should be. You have to blame the outside so that you can start differentiating between what is you and what is not you. But what you're referring to and what you're describing in terms of coming into that radical responsibility is to go, okay, this happened. I was given this belief, or was given this experience, but then I continue to perpetuate it. I continue
Absolutely.
to keep it going and keep it alive in me long after the experience is gone. And that is
Absolutely.
radical responsibility you're talking about, which is part of this larger journey of liberating ourselves, is that we
Mm-hmm.
have to say, I'm the one who's keeping this going. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a hard one to come to, you know? It's like way easier to just, be in a state of victimhood where we can just look at others and be like, you made me like this, you did this to me, you said that to me. And when really it's, that's disempowering ourselves. And we have the opportunity to take responsibility for those thoughts and feelings at any moment and take that power back from that place where we felt alone or scared or weak or ugly or however.
Yeah, absolutely. So beautifully said. I think I very much relate to your process. And I've been going, through one myself. And it's interesting because like the space where it really shows up for me in my body is like my stomach and like my belly. And my first podcast episode was about that. It was about kind of this awakening to how much I was like holding in this area in my body, like shame. And one of the ways I've started to like recently reconnect with that space somatically has actually been through physically touching my belly when I
Mm,
feel overwhelmed or scared, because it used to be this place where I would like squeeze my belly like I wish I could cut it off, or I wish it wasn't there, or I was resenting like the squishiness of it or something. And so I started to like reprogram myself by like holding my belly in like a comforting way, squeezing the flesh of my belly and like kind of, like it's a safety blanket or something, almost like, when we're little kids, maybe some people have this experience of like the softness of your mother, or your caretaker's body,
mhm.
and the way that their arms were soft or squishy against your face when they held you, or, the way that their chest or their bosom or their belly was this like soft landing place, and can I like recreate that for myself and start to reprogram this like place where I've held a lot of judgment about myself? How can I start to transform that into like a place where love exists, where comfort can be found? And it's a project, it's ongoing. But
Absolutely.
I just felt like, when you were talking about that, it just brought that up for me because I'm in that myself. I'm in that process. And, you know, when you're working with people, do you feel like each person has a, unique place where they may be holding their pain or their trauma, or is it actually pretty like reliable, like that most people are carrying it in these spaces?
Honestly, it's going to be different for everyone. And it seems that for each emotion, it has a frequency, has an energy to it. And depending on that frequency, it's going to be stored in different areas of our body. For instance, emotional areas around fear and feeling pressured or feeling a sense of, like their will is not their own, and they're having to do things because, they feel like they're expected to do this, expected to do that. Energies like that oftentimes are going to be stored around the area of the solar plexus. And the solar plexus is going to be an area of, our embodied light, our will, our courage, our confidence. And if we're doing things because we feel like we have to do them, it's going to be draining that area. If we feel like, oh, I have to do this, I gotta go do that, those kind of thoughts and beliefs will actually store energy and drain that solar plexus area. But we have the opportunity to then transmute that and be able to take that same experience, thought, and feeling from a place of like, oh, I have to do this, and find within ourselves where our deeper, want, compassion, and personal will, and our love is, that we can shift it to a place of, I get to do this. I want to do that. And that actually allows for the energy to move upward within the body's energy systems up into the heart space, and allowing that tightness in that solar plexus of feeling almost cornered into having to do something that they don't want to do, to be released. So each person is going to be different depending on what feelings that they're going through. And, these emotions, they store in the body. And though, however, I feel that, it's made to do that because it is the roadmap. We allows us to know, like, okay, I have tension here on my shoulders, specifically maybe on my right shoulder, and shoulders are gonna be, feeling like we have to take on the weight of the world. And oftentimes those, heavy feelings are then triggered and amplified by belief of thinking that we have to do everything on our own, you know and that right side is going to be more of our physical, our masculine side, our doing side, and feeling like we're expected to take on everything. It's going to, feel heavy on that side. And it goes in deeper. So almost a person comes in with ailments and they'll say, I have, this pain here and that pain here. And it'll lead me to asking them some deeper questions that specifically relate to those areas of stagnancy. And every single time, I swear, 100% of the time. And I remember when I started first realizing this a long time ago, that our emotions are held into different places of our body that directly can relate to us, and the answer to being able to release it according to where it's being stored, which chakra and what information and characteristics are connected to each one. And yeah, so everyone's a little bit different, but then also very similar, because we all, go through so many of the same things, and we don't even realize it because we don't really share with each other these deeper stresses that every one of us goes through.
Yeah, I love those examples. Those are some great examples of like how it kind of is. It sounds like it's a blend of both. It's like we all have our unique blueprint, and there are very kind of like not just reasonable, but like almost logical. Like if someone's having issues with their jaw or their throat or their mouth, like maybe they're holding back expressing themselves. There's
Exactly.
it's like that makes sense, like we talk about the weight of the world on our shoulders, feeling like we have to carry a burden. That's literally kind of like what it feels like when you're having all this pressure coming down, on your shoulders, or your shoulders feel like there's a rock on your back,
Yeah,
like it's almost obvious. It's like in plain sight, the way that these things actually operate, in our
absolutely.
system, the
I
emotional.
feel like, I kind of sum it up into the words of emotional hygiene. And I really feel that our bodies actually know emotional hygiene. It knows the deeper reasons why we're holding on to this pressure, this fear, that fear, this pain or that pain. But for whatever reason and how, we've, have come so far in the areas of relying on allopathic medicine, relying on someone to just give us a pill, relying on a diagnosis to kind of, we don't have to go into that area and cleanse it, clear it, work with our feelings and so on and such. We can just take a pill and it'll just go away. But what we're finding out is that it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love for you to speak a little bit on, like, the everything that we've been talking about. Well, I know not everything, but a big portions of things that we've been talking about. You're now creating a 6-month container to guide people through some of these processes that you're referring to. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now?
Absolutely. Yeah. I am creating a 6-month sacred course, a container of absolute safety where I guide people to learn about the tools of how to connect with their body, their nervous system, how to self regulate and co regulate, how to bring their nervous systems and bodies back to a place of connection with their soul self, and that truly that there is this soulmate within themselves. And I take them through a process where each month is built out to help us go a little bit deeper, where we'll be clearing the body temple and cleansing out any and all energies that you maybe not were 100%, to cleansing out limiting beliefs about potentially looks or body image or self-confidence or how lovable you might be, and really giving ourselves the opportunity to make it fun and playful and connected to that, that tender curiosity and playfulness within inside of ourselves, and teaching people how to listen to the intuition of their own body. And I really feel that there's so much power in my own personal experience of breaking free from old patterns. And, you know, when we are attached to these old patterns, we oftentimes we attract the same thing over and over again. And teaching people how to break free from old patterns and old relationships, and how to step into their personal soul alignment. So when they, if they are in relationship, being able to deepen their connection, intimacy, vulnerability, and bond with their partner that they have currently. And if they're not in relationship, getting into soul alignment. So when the right relationship is in front of them, they're actually available for that experience.
Wow.
Because,
It
yeah,
sounds like
because
a combination then of, like, working with your relationship with yourself so that you can have functional, joyful, connected relationships with others. But that's not the point of it. It's not like you're doing this work so that you can have those things, but that's a byproduct of this work with yourself.
absolutely. Because when we do this work, we become safe spaces for relationship and for ourselves. One of the areas of the work that we will be doing is being able to do the soul discovery work of nurturing those spaces, the void of the areas that are still waiting to be saved, loved, accepted, supported, instead of waiting for someone else to come into our lives to give us that safety and support. We're actually going to learn how to be able to do that for ourselves. And that creates a way more safe space and person and container to be able to begin a friendship or, potential relationship.
Well, any kind of relationship, because I mean,
Absolutely.
relationships in our lives are everywhere. It's not just, it's the relationship you might have with a business partner, or a relationship you might have with your child's teacher at school, or even with a neighbor. Like, these relationships show up, and we can definitely improve all of the relationships in our lives by improving the relationship we have with ourselves. Like, I've often
Absolutely.
looked back on relationships in my life that fell apart or that did not, work out in various ways. And kind of going back to that idea of radical responsibility, it's so easy to kind of blame the other person and give them like a label that gives me an out as to why like that didn't work. But as I have worked more with like those hidden parts of myself, as you're describing, like
Hmm.
recognize like, oh no, like I was partially responsible for that. And it came from a place in me that was aching. It came from a pain inside me that I was unconscious to, that was running amok and like not allowing this relationship to be functional, and then the other person
Absolutely.
too, they have their half of it, but to be able to accept and do something about that pain that you're carrying so that the relationship has its best chance, right?
Absolutely. And I feel that we oftentimes are manifesting these experiences and relationships to help us through those emotional wounds and triggers so we can be available, so we can return to a state of love again. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm so excited for this. Do you have a title for this program or any kind of launch date that you're imagining?
Well, I'm finishing up on the course details and the layout on my platform, and I'm looking forward to launching it sometime within the new year, within in January. And I'm still kind of playing with the name. I keep on talking to spirit about the name, and it might be, become your soulmate, or connect to your soul. I'm still listening to what the right keywords are, because this work is, such a huge transformational part of my life, and what has kept my life feeling so blessed and so free and so supported is being able to connect to my soul, and because my soul is connected to the universe, and I can have the backup and support of the universe then through the vessel of my soul. And so yeah, I'm really excited to be able to share this work with people, because I feel that this is the work that I was meant to share. Yeah.
I feel that from you too.
Yeah. I really feel that, it's like being able to connect to your soul. I feel like you'll never have to be alone ever again. And that's one of the, areas where I really felt that as a young person. I felt really alone. And then I realized that actually I was never alone, because my soul was there with me the whole time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That illusion that we are alone versus
Mm,
connecting with the truth of that grace that surrounds us.
absolutely. Yeah. That connection and creating that deep reverence and dialogue with your soul, and really creates such a more beautiful and creative and playful life experience for me, and gives me the freedom to know that, like, I can play as much as I want, I can create exactly the way I want, I can speak and share exactly the way that I want, and that it's exactly right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
that it takes away this like judgment of it having to be good enough for society or media or others, and it has to just be good enough for me and my soul.
Perfect. I love that. And kind of brings us back to this idea of being, self-contained and having tools inside of us and including the tools to affirm ourselves and to allow ourselves to be okay as we are and accept, our life and our body and our being as we are. And from that place, things start to change and evolve and transform naturally, without the
Absolutely.
forcing or cajoling or whatever it is that we are programmed to do to try to make ourselves be, some way or fit some form.
Absolutely. Yeah. I like to imagine and also ask my clients, to imagine themselves as the person that they, were before they came into this world, and to really feel into, like, what were you excited about coming into this world to share, and just connecting with that part that isn't diluted by society yet and all of its expectations, and getting to really strengthen that core connection to to our joy again, and that alignment and connection to that grace.
When you said that, the first thought that came into my mind, like, what did I come here for? And I
Hmm.
had thought, like, I came here to be on an adventure.
Yes, the grand adventure.
Yeah.
I
So
feel that.
more and more looking to embrace that side of myself that is here for the adventure, including, and there's no adventure that doesn't come without hardship, without suffering, without perils, without, you know, mishap,
Yeah,
right? That's part of the adventure. It has to
that's
be like
right.
that's part of the definition.
That's what makes it rich,
For sure. And the triumphs, they're gonna come too. The victories are gonna come. That's also part of it. And
Yeah.
can we be with all of it?
Absolutely. And that's how I feel about being adopted. I feel like being adopted is one of the most amazing adventures to have gotten to experience, because I feel that for me, I took it on as a challenge of how I can create being adopted, becoming an absolute superpower of mine.
Yes. Oh man. And I'm so glad too that like you're branching out more to talk about this subject and maybe even specifically connect with, like we mentioned at the beginning of this episode, some of the generation of Korean adoptees who came to the United States who are trying to piece together their identity and are looking to heal these parts of themselves that are generationally wounded. And I think that you are just, in addition to what we already kind of discussed, like, and it fits well with that, actually, this is something that you are uniquely designed and able to do for people and provide for people as part of like who you are. And that's just fantastic to think about that being, like you said, a superpower.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. That really hits home, because I truly do feel that doing this deeper work of being courageous enough to feel the feelings and really witness the wound, that's when we allow for those wounds to be able to heal. And my 20 plus years of experience of facilitating healing work, and then being adopted and recognizing how these two areas of my life really, I feel like we're made for each other, because there are part of the reason why I feel so inspired and moved to do this work with connecting to our soul, and also with helping to support adoptees, is because it is so close to home. It's so tender in my heart. There's so many people out there who I've talked to who they want those tools. They don't have a community where they, or a family that where they've been able to talk about these feelings. They didn't have support where they could feel the loss and of their original biological families, and to really help them find their own dialogue, to create that connection, and to place that love, and to be supported by that grace, where they can be able to do their own healing work. And it's like sometimes I think, well, maybe I have too many healing tools, and then I realize I'm like, actually they're all really valuable, because each and every one kind of heals in their own different way, and I kind of just put these different tools in their hands, and then they run with the ones that they resonate with. And it's really truly amazing to see when people are able to rewrite their stories and free themselves from painful traumas that reoccur in our minds. And yeah, that allows them to be free to step into their soul's work, if they what they want to share all to all of us then. So I'm excited to share this work.
Fantastic. If people want to learn more about you or they want to look into this program you've described, where would people be able to reach out to you?
They could reach out to me on Instagram at Laurie Jeannie. It's Laurie JEANIE on Instagram. Or they could also, my website is in transition, but there is a page for connection that's lotusintouch.com. That's LOTUSINTOUCH.com. And yeah, I'm, I had a dream about a year so ago of, instead of just having one-on-one experiences with my clients, which I truly love, I had a dream where I was being asked to share on a bigger level and to teach these tools on a bigger level. And so I'm doing that work and of sharing with more people and getting these tools into more hands.
Fantastic. Yeah, I would love that because there is something that's really special about that one-to-one energy. And yet when we start opening it to a group, it invites a more collective, relational healing process to occur. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think is really important. It helps for deeper integration of the work we're doing rather than it just being, you privately with, with a teacher, with an expert, with, a sage, and you're in this dynamic that just automatically has a certain kind of like, power dynamic that like you just is acknowledged. One person knows a lot more about this and is orchestrating this, and the other person is receiving. Versus when you have a cohort, when you have other people alongside you in the process with you, that just changes the whole energy and it becomes much more cohesive and yeah, more of that relational healing of how do we apply this to my real life.
Absolutely. I feel that, I can share information, I can share tools, but I truly feel that the deeper healing actually comes from being able to sit down and be witnessed by people who are almost speaking your words, feeling your feelings and have had your experiences, and being able to witness each other and support each other. I feel that there is such a profound healing that comes from that than just someone saying, hey, this is what you do. You just, you heal this part, you heal that part, and you tap here, you tap there, and you're good, but there's an unspoken power when you are literally just witnessed by people who can truly empathize from direct personal experience. You can't put that into words, I feel like, Yeah, we're really excited. I do have a group of women who I'm working with, one other adoptee as well from Korea, and we've been orchestrating and creating the ability to support adoptees in a retreat space so we can be able to do this in person and share directly and connect directly with each other and really not only help each other heal but also empower each other to truly thrive.
That sounds like such an amazing project. I'd love to see that come to fruition and and be able to be offered to people who maybe they don't even know they're looking for it, but they're looking for it, right? That's
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think they're really going to love it, but I'm also wondering, how do you let them know what you're truly providing them? And so we're cultivating and putting all the details together as we speak. So I'm excited looking at launching those in-person retreats sometime in the spring of 2024. So I'm really super excited, but also really honored to be able to help facilitate that work because there's nothing like in-person healing and as a group.
Oh, yes, yes, definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing these really important and powerful messages with people. I'm sure that our listeners have been inspired and, moved by your testimony, by your experiences and what you've gone through. And, for even people who have not, been adopted, maybe they got a little window into that experience today and maybe even could relate to some of the pieces of what you shared, even if they had a totally different upbringing and raising, because some of the things you shared are very universal.
Absolutely.
If you have any last words for our audience, if some final message of something that you'd like to share or that you'd like to say.
I'd just like to say thank you so much for your time and your vision and your heart to you, Amy, and to also your audience as well. I'm sure that this information resonates with you because you also are of like mind and heart, and I'm just really excited to be able to continue to challenge myself to learn and grow and to be able to serve my community even more.
Excellent. Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
it's such an honor to speak with you today, and I'd love to have you back on the show later in the season, share about how these things are updating and going forward. And yeah, thank you once again for coming on.
Great. Thank you so much. I'd love to return. And yeah, thanks again for having me on the show.
You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. To find out more information about today's guest, check the show notes. And to find out more information about me, Amy Takaya, and the Radiance program, visit www.freeyoursoma.com.